Good morning, everyone, and we're back at it again. Welcome to another episode of Grief Let's Talk About It podcast, man. And we have another amazing guest, and I'm going to do a brief introduction on her. I'm going to bring her up there. So for you guys that are tuning in today, let's give her a warm welcome. If you guys are going to be tuning in later on this afternoon and then catching the pre-recorded, guys, leave a message. This is just going to keep getting better and better. So without further ado, let me just tell you a little bit about my guest. Today we have Lisa Heacock. She is the proud mother of two adult daughters, Bree and Alexa, and a partner to Darren. Lisa is the owner of Holistic Life Coaching with Lisa Marie. Lisa is an international certified and accredited life coach, grief coach, certified grief educator, keynote speaker, podcast host of the Because We Love and Finding Meaning After Loss podcast, an international best-selling author and breast cancer survivor. I mean, and her story just keeps getting better and better. So without further ado, let me introduce her. You guys sit back and enjoy and let us know what you think. Hi, Lisa. It's good.
Hi.
Great again. Great to see you again.
Yeah,
Thank you for joining us today on this wonderful, beautiful. What is it? Wednesday?
I
Yes.
think so.
You know what? It's been a long week, girl.
It's good to be here.
How have you been since the last time that we talked?
Yeah, really good, really good. I enjoyed our conversation. I'm looking forward to having you on my show next.
You know what? We're going to talk about that too. But
Yeah,
today is all about you. So without further ado, I want you to introduce yourself, tell people where you're from, and then let's talk about your story.
great. Yeah. So my name is Lisa, and I'm originally from Seattle, but I actually live in the UK. I have been here for 18 years. I have two gorgeous daughters. They're adult daughters, 29 and 30 years old. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, I've been in the UK for a very long time, but my story really kind of started. I grew up in a wonderful home. I didn't really suffer any real significant loss in my life. I was really quite fortunate until 2018. You get those calls. I'm 4,000 miles away, and it's those calls that you fear that are going to happen. Eventually they're going to happen. Um, and it was January 2018. I got a call that my niece, who had had a long illness most of her life, passed away. Um, and then a week later, I got a call from my mom saying that my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer. And that really, it's like the earth opened up and swallowed me whole. I was very close to my dad. Um, and so I quit my job. And my husband at the time, I just said, I've got to quit my job. I just knew I needed to be back in Seattle to help care for my dad. And do you know what? Take care of my mom as well. They'd been married for 50 plus years. So I knew I was going to carry the grief of my mom and my dad and my family. So I just knew I needed to be there. So I stayed there until he passed away about 7 months later. Um, and then coming back to the UK was difficult, but I knew that I needed to come back. And a few months later, my mom came to visit. It was really so strange, Tony, because she got off the plane and she was alone. And I've never seen my mom without my dad. And anytime they came to the UK, they were always together. So it was really this kind of reality, but we had a great time. I mean, we traveled, we did some of the things that she wanted to do, and she was stayed with us for a couple months. And when I hugged her when we were getting ready to leave, I did not know that was going to be the last time that I was going to hug my mom.
Wow.
Yeah. So a few
Wow.
months after that, we talked every day. every
Right.
day. And so for about 4 months, and she wasn't answering her calls. She wasn't, and I was like, who? So I started asking everybody, when did you last see my mom? When did you last see mom? I have a brother there. When was the last time you see mom? I'm like, get over there. Something's not right. And she had passed us away in her sleep, comfortably in her chair, but had passed away. And, between that and my dad, that was 14 months, so back to Seattle to bury
Yeah.
my mom.
I mean, the impact of it, because you got hit back to back to back. Your niece, your father, your mother, back to back to back. You
Yeah,
know, now during that time, what was going on through your mind, right? Because you had just lost both of your parents and a niece, right?
yeah,
And I can only speak from my perspective, like and I can tell you from my perspective, I lost it. I was like, holy crap, what is going on? So
yeah.
in that moment, what are you thinking? What's going on with you after especially with those immediate losses? And it didn't just stop there. So
No.
take us back to the moment.
Yeah, it didn't stop there, sadly. I have had friends' children. I lost 12 loved ones in a 22-month period.
Right.
So 2 months after my mom died, my 24-year-old son-in-law passed away in a sudden accident in front of my daughter. Now that took me to my knees. That was just the crux of it. So there were so many losses. So what was going through my mind? You know what? With my mom and my dad, like with my dad, I was full on action. I'm an action oriented person. So what do we need to do? How do we keep him healthy? Spending as much time with him, but trying to keep him um, as pain free as possible, and create some memories and care for my mom and just kind of step in. So to be honest, I just went in that mode. That was my mode of taking care of my family. It wasn't until I came home that I kind of just crashed, shut the curtains. I didn't want to talk to really anybody but my children and a couple friends.
Right,
Um,
right.
do you know, I for me with my parents, and when my mom died suddenly, there was such a difference. So my dad, it was hard to watch him. And so that creates a whole different type of grief, right? The anticipatory grief. I'm anticipating that this is what's happening. So there's all these hundreds of losses as you go along. But I got to say goodbye. We got to create memories with him. Like I said, with my mom's sudden loss, that was a completely different, and my son-in-law, that's a completely different feeling of not being able to say goodbye. It's sudden, the shock. It's like nobody expected that. And especially with my son-in-law, who is 24 years old, you don't expect that to happen. So it's like you can't wake up from the nightmare. So with each loss, it really, what was going on in my head was something very different with each one. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to survive this and be able to care for my children who are grieving, my daughter who lost the love of her life, I need to make sure I'm going to take care of me so that I can take care of them. So I grabbed everything I could.
Wow. Because
Yeah.
I mean, the grieving process, as we both know, and I learned this as I was starting to grieve my losses as well. You know, we have a base foundation for it, right? The 5 stages of grief, which we find out later on that hey, this is the 5 stages of grief was written for people who are going through a terminal illness, right? And so I always often tell people, just use it as a baseline because there's actually 40 40 some stages of grief that are associated around that basis. So it was never meant for people who were going through the grieving process. It was meant for the people who were going through a terminal illness. And so that's a whole different set of grief. And if you haven't experienced that, we do have a foundation for it. So now understanding that, was that your basis when you were going through the process of grief? Because our first instinct is, we have to, we go into survival mode. We have to go and take care of everyone and things like that. But also, you came to the realization that, hey, I have to take care of me too. I have to take care of me first in order for me to be good for everyone else, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
in itself,
Yeah. Yes, and that, I mean, for me, I had this knowledge for doing work in the States. I did some grief work. I led groups, and I understood grief and loss in that level, but not obviously so incredibly personal. Like now it's real. But I had to pull some of those tools out of my tool belt that like, oh my God, I remember that. I need to think about that. I also have my mom was instrumental in talking about how to care for yourself. So even while she was grieving the loss of her husband, which was the worst loss of her entire life, and she had had many losses,
right,
she would say, "You don't need to be strong for me, Lisa. Like you need to take care of yourself and make sure you're." So she was still mom, she was still being mom, but it was
right,
always a
right,
reminder. So I had some knowledge about the stages of grief. I had some knowledge of that, but to be honest, I didn't even think about any stage. I just felt what I was feeling, and
right,
sometimes I would just just not feel that deeply because I had work to do with my dad. Like, nope, I'm going to just power through. And I did what I had to do to survive. But honestly, like now looking back at it, it's like, ooh, 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 but I had great support out of a best friend who was there for me.
right. And I think that's truly amazing. And you get you said the magic word. It was like you just have to survive in those moments, right?
Yeah.
And shutting down. And we do. I mean, it's as if we can find distractions, things like that, to not feel. That's what we'll dive into. Because I can tell you, the things that I've learned later on as I got into the work, like brain fog, grief brain, and things like that. I didn't even know nothing about that, right? And like you said, you do what comes naturally to you, right? And sometimes we don't even know that we're doing exactly what we're supposed to do. We often get wrapped up into, is there a right way to do this? Is there a wrong way to do this? And things like that. And, now I understand and I pass that knowledge on. Do what you feel in those moments because that is usually what you need, right?
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong way of doing this. There's no blueprint to say this is the way you're supposed to do it. No, you're going to have to go through the motions. You're going to have to feel it in a deep level. And like you said, um, having done the work before, you had some sort of knowledge and things like that. But there's a difference when you have that intimate relationship with it, right? Because now it's personal, right?
Yeah.
And we both have seen people who don't understand that when it's personal, they can either take it in a negative way or they can turn it around and go, I'm going to build a relationship with this and see where this thing takes me. And that's where we find out that we can have a different connection. We can have a different relationship with it and things like that. You know, so now you're moving through it, you're growing through it, you're experiencing those levels of grief, you're surviving, and now but you do have your family that you have to take care of, you know. So now in that moment, how is the relationship between you and your family? You have a support group, right?
Yeah.
So now how are you interacting with your family in that relationship?
Yeah. You mean during that time or now?
Well, during that time leading up until now.
Yeah. So, so with like taking care of my girls, I mean, they're adults, but obviously We really bonded. I mean, we have always been extremely close, but I think that this loss, especially the loss of Jack, had to bring us closer. Like you have to. So my daughters are extremely close, but they're even closer now because I think with trauma and loss and grief, it can go either way. You can either like relationships can be severed or relationships can be brought together. I think, to be honest, one of my biggest things was, okay, I'm going through all this. I could be angry, I can be whatever. I'm trying really hard not to be a jerk to people. I'm trying really hard not to ruin relationships, but relationships got ruined. And I wouldn't say necessarily it was me. It could have been them. It could have been both of us with our grief and loss. But regardless, what I have found during the time of loss and grief and all those emotions is that it really highlights and shows the integrity and the actual person on the inside. When you're faced with that is what comes out. And I have seen both sides, you know?
Right? Oh my God. And sometimes we don't like what we see, do we? Oh my God.
No.
It break you open and say, this is who you are now, right? And I love that you said that there because you've seen both sides. And I've had to see both sides from the mirror perspective, right? The person that was inside of me, and then a person that I was looking at in the mirror. And I was like, whoa, and I realized that they were two totally different people. They were two totally different people. But the thing that I didn't realize, right? And this is where I took things personal because I was just like you. And I was being a prick in some areas, right? Because, and I guess for me, and tell me if you can relate to this or not. I felt that people were saying some of the most stupidest things to me and comparing, their loss of a dog or a pet to what I had just experienced. And I was like, it's not the same. Therapists, right? Oh my God, you should have seen it. I was telling therapists, they were like, look, come and see me. I was like, why do I need to come see you? Tell me what makes you, how do you know what I'm going through? Well, I've read a bunch of books, then whoa, then you don't understand what I'm going through. You go talk to somebody else, right? I was man, look.
I think one of the things that I tell clients is that guilt and grief and anger and grief, they're like married couple. They're hands in hand. And so, the guilt and the grief go hand in hand. We all have it. It's like, it's okay. It's okay to be this. It's okay to feel these things. And there is no rule book. And so what I always say is like creating a safe, confidential space for that person to just feel what they feel, say what they say without judging them. And, so it is creating that safe space. The issue that I find is, and I agree, and that's part of the grief educator part where I try to educate people on what to say, what not to say, what to do, what not to do. I think that's really important because people do just say stupid things. And I don't think they necessarily mean to be stupid in what they're saying, but it can really be damaging for those of us who, if you compare losing, a parent to losing your dog, and they're, people are devastated. When my dog dies, I'm going to be devastated, but it isn't like losing my parents or my son-in-law. But the reality is people say these things and there's trying to be connecting point. And I think what I've noticed, and what I've noticed is loved ones don't want you to hurt. People don't want you to hurt. So it's like, I'm uncomfortable. How do I make him or her not hurt? So I'm going to say something like they're in a better place or something, time heals all wounds. That one I hate.
That one is a classic. Oh.
I always say, do not say those things because first of all, grief, it will be with you forever. Is suffering, is it that acute suffering? I mean,
Hmm.
not necessarily, if you can work through some of these things. And I always tell people, like, just try to create a life of passion and purpose around your pain. You take it with you. You don't get over it. It's not, I'll never get over the loss of, because I love them. They're my loved ones. And
Yeah, that's a
yeah,
part.
so
Yeah, that's a part of you. You know what I found that over a period of like as I began to develop um, the thing that was inside of me that woke me up and said, "Hey, this is who you are," and everything started to make sense to me. I realized that and I mentioned this to other guys and women as well. It's not personal, right?
mm,
When people like you just said, they're trying to relate to you the best way that they know how, right? So don't take it personal, even though it sounds as if they're comparing apples and oranges. What they're doing is comparing what they know,
yeah,
so
yeah,
to try to relate to you, because like you said, they don't, your friends and your family, the people that care about you don't want to see you hurt. But I think that they're doing the best that they can. So now as the people receiving that, the grievers, you know, um, it's easy for us to get wrapped up into the personable aspect of it and go,
yeah,
how do you do this, right? But now here's where the mindfulness comes in into that space, right? Once you get to a certain point, it doesn't happen overnight. We both know this, right? But over a period of time, you can go back and you can look at the what they was just saying and go, you know what? I appreciate you, um, because I realized that you were doing the best that you knew, the best that you could with what you knew and what you
mm,
had to work with. And so I appreciate that coming from a place of understanding now,
yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Um, and in the relationships, just like you said, there were some people that left, right? They were like, this is too much. I used to look at them and go, too much for you? I don't know why
yeah,
we have to go through this. What do you mean it's too much for you? But I realized again, they were doing the best that they could with what they had to work with, right?
yeah,
And don't get me wrong, I had some really good friends. I had a couple of really good friends that stood around and said, you know what, Tony, what is it that you need from me?
mm,
And that meant so much to me because I didn't even know what I needed. And they were like,
yes,
hey, just need me to sit here? I'm good with that. If you want to go fishing, because I love fishing, right? You want to go fishing? Let's go fishing. You want to go, hey, I'm here, right? And I realized on the reverse end that they were doing what their body, their intuition was telling them without knowing it, right?
yeah,
So it's that
yep.
connectivity that I appreciate now that I understand, you know.
Yes.
So yeah, I'm gonna hand
And
it.
you're doing the same thing, aren't you?
Right,
We
right.
learn too from that experience. And you're right. I mean, usually tell people, like, to ask somebody, like, I'm here for whatever you need. We do not know what we need. You were talking about that grief fog. I didn't know that existed, but that is a real thing
Yes,
and it
yeah.
lasts a
No,
long time.
2
I don't
years,
know what I need. Yes,
2 years.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
2 years to be exact. For because after the first 2 years, after my mother passed away, and she passed away that shortly after, well, actually 2 years after my son had passed, my mother passed, and that's why I went into a routine. Right, I didn't know. There was times that went on, and I could not tell you what I did.
yeah,
I
yeah.
For years I had a routine. I got up in the morning. I went to work. Well, I got up in the morning. I ate, showered, went to work. Couldn't tell you what I did. And I was now here's the dangerous part, right? I was driving trash truck.
Right.
I'm driving trash truck, right? And I couldn't tell you what I did. I couldn't tell you the people that I talked to. I couldn't tell you any of the conversations. All I know is that when my route was done, I went back home and I had everything in I had my gym in my garage. So I worked out because I was still trying to stay fit. But I realized that was my addiction because I didn't do drugs, I didn't drink. So I worked out, but I was reckless. And I was a big boy. I was 300 some odd pounds. Nothing but muscle. Here I am. Leaving out of bodybuilding at the time. So And I would put as much weight as I could up there and go, you know what? If I die, I die, you know? And then from
Yeah.
there, I still had my routine with eating. I still had my routine with, watching a movie, but I never left the house. Right.
Mm.
So that was the part that I didn't understand. I didn't want to be bothered with nobody. I had everything at home. And if I needed to go to the store, I took 15 minutes to go to the store, grabbed what I needed, and came back home. But I
Yeah.
could not tell you what I did.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I couldn't.
And that I think is such an important thing for people to understand who are going through grief, that they go, oh my God, I get what Tony is saying. I understand what Lisa's saying, because that's me, or that was me. Because, and or sadly, because this is a part of reality, life and death, there will be people who haven't experienced that, but they will. And so
Yes.
just going, oh, okay, oh, this is that grief fog, this grief brain. And it's interesting because you're just surviving, you're just going to work, just. And what I found interesting for me with grief, because again, everybody is different. When my dad passed away and I came home, like I shut the curtains, didn't want to talk to anyone. But
Yes.
when my mom died, when Jack died, I was like, no, I needed people. I needed people around me. It was the weirdest thing. I thought for sure I'm going to go into some, I was helping my daughter and I was doing all those things, but I needed my friends. I needed people to come sit with me. Whereas before I was like, nah, I'm good. Don't, don't come
Yeah.
over like you. I don't want to leave the house. I don't really care. I just don't want to talk to a soul. I'm just going to watch Netflix, eat my popcorn, put my hoodie over my head, and just
I
zone
love
out.
it.
That
I
was it.
love
Like
it.
that was my life. Like I'm just going
Yeah.
to do this for a while. I knew I wouldn't stay there, and that's the thing that I knew enough about grief and loss and healing, and I knew I wasn't going to stay there. I knew that I had something in me, a resilience, and maybe it was because I was Larry and Sally's daughter. Like I knew that I had this power in me, but right now it's just hideous and I just
Yeah.
need to sit in front of Netflix. But I knew that there would come a point when I could get back up and start slowly rebuilding. And I did not do it alone. And I think that's the other part, like you were saying, like your friends. I had some great friends, and I went to a bereavement counselor. That was the first thing I did after my mom died, because I just didn't know what to do. And I was like, well, that's what you do. And then
Right.
after that, I hired a life coach after I had done counseling for some time, because I was like, okay, well, now what? And to be honest, I didn't even know what a life coach was, but I just knew that I needed something to move me forward and do that thing or those things that I wanted to do with my life.
Right.
Um, and to be honest, I felt like I was like hearing my parents, not their physical voice, but hearing them being like, Lisa, like, just get on with it. Like, don't, like, we're good. You need to, and just that kind of parenting, that they always were my cheerleader, and you have a relationship with your mom. Like there was like this cheerleader, like, keep going, Lisa, you've got this, you've got
Right.
this. And then when I started to come out of that cocoon and feel a bit more, a bit stronger, and then I felt like I could look back and kind of help others along
Right.
the way, but it wasn't until I got my own stuff together.
Hey, you know
or
what?
I'm never together. It's never together, but you know what I mean, a little
I was
bit.
going to say that, and don't be afraid to use curse words. Like I said,
Okay.
we
You
are
never
not,
know.
we're not rated PG or G, right? You know what I'm saying? We are an adult show. So, and
Okay,
sometimes you
good.
have to throw a few words in there, a fuck, a
Okay.
damn, this, that, another, right? Because when we think about the rawness of grief, right? Sometimes it's not kind.
Yeah.
There are times grief is not kind to you, right? Sometimes grief comes up and says, hey, you know what? If you're not going to pay attention to me, I am going to punch you in your fucking mouth.
Yep.
And I'm going to make you scream. That's just the bottom line of it, right? You know what I'm saying? Grief comes up and go, hey, I'm sitting up here talking to you. Take that fucker,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
things like that. And so I want people to understand that grief is raw. It has no rhyme or reason, right? It will put you on a path of either healing or destruction.
Yeah.
But the beautiful part about grief is that you get to choose. You get to choose whether or not if you're going to fight going through the motions. And as a man, right? This is how I can speak from this perspective, because men, on the other hand, just like women, and Jordan Peterson said it best. Women are into people, men are into things, right? So that's why you get the differences in personality traits when it comes down to it. So when women, and I found this across the board, and this is probably one of the very few differences I see between how men and women grieve. But if we look at it, there's a whole lot of similarities. Women have a tendency to navigate towards community and
Yeah.
people
Yes.
wanting people to come around to talk to, and it's been like that since the beginning of time. Whereas men, we're taught not to express our emotions. We're taught to man up. We're taught to keep it moving. We're taught not to cry. All of these different things. And what ends up happening is that you see the rise in addiction and homelessness and the suicides when it comes down to men, right?
Yes.
When people can look at it from that perspective, I always say, what you see is not what's really going on. See, they have it written in the books. They just don't have it in the right order,
Mm.
right? They forgot that we as men, we do have emotions. We do have those emotions. We come equipped with them. We just tend to this is one of my favorite sayings. When men cry, it's expressed as anger.
Mm.
Think about that for a minute, right? That's how men cry, because we're not taught how to be emotional. So how do we express it? Through our masculine nature. If we can't fix it, we break it. We get frustrated. We get angry. This is us crying.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa,
Mhm.
when I heard that, I was like, that makes perfect sense.
Mm.
You need to change the narrative.
Yeah,
This is what you're
absolutely.
seeing.
Mm.
Yeah.
And
So
it's not just loss of loved ones through death, is it either? So you
no.
think about the addiction and the homelessness and this suicidal, parental alienation, divorce,
Uh-huh.
job
Mhm.
loss, career loss, like any type of loss could causes grief.
Right.
Is that
Loss of a job.
pain? Yeah. Their identity is like attached to their job, right?
There you
So
go. Yes. In many, many aspects, right? Loss of a vehicle. It could be that one vehicle that you want, right? But it's above your means. And so you're barely making the payments on it. And then one day
mm,
something happens in your life, right? Now you can no longer make that payment. So you panic. You panic. What am I going to do? They're going to come take the car. Oh, I got to hide it. So now we become little crafty little people. We got to hide it. We got to, or that first heartbreak, right? Because we all want to believe that the first person that we with is the one that's going to be with us forever, right? Because that's the one that we're putting our all into, because we don't know.
mm,
We don't know. We just know what we feel in that moment. And then that heartbreak comes, right?
yeah, yeah.
Women have a tendency to go to be emotional. Men have a tendency to go be angry,
Mm,
right? Similar across the board, right? You know what I'm saying? Or the loss of your best friend that you've had all your years, and they move away. Now you're in a state of trying to figure out who's going to be my next friend. Do I want a next friend? Oh, he or she betrayed me, and things like that. All of these different things carry its own set of relationable loss or
yeah.
grief, right?
It is, and that is such an important part. I mean, when I moved from the US to the UK and didn't know anybody
Hmm.
except for my husband at the time and my 2 kids, like, no job, no nothing. I lost my community, I lost my it was an upheaval and it was a rebuilding, but there was loss and grief and anger and all of those things that you said. So, I think that's the thing about when we think of grief, we only think of the loss of loved ones through death.
Right.
But there are so many people who are walking around grieving and angry or emotional or whatever you want to call it. There's, like you said, there's something in there that's much deeper than what we see.
And I love that. And you know, the key to it is, and this is the part that people don't like to hear because we all want to be tough. At some point, you have to surrender.
Mm,
You have to surrender to the emotions. You have to surrender to the direction that is taking you in. You have to surrender to the pieces of you that you keep trying to hold on to
mm,
because those things keep you safe, have kept you safe, right? And these are very familiar. And when I say you have to surrender to it, people are like, no, no, no. This is what's kept me who I am all of these years. I cannot give that up. And that's where the struggle comes in. Because through surrender, you allow yourself permission to go with the flow of your grief and go in a direction in the path that you're on. That's how we get to where we are, right? These
yeah.
things that we learn, we learn it from lived experience because we had to go through the roller coaster ride, right? We had to
Yeah.
go through the broken relationships and the new found relationships, the communities, right? You know, I wish um when I was going through it, I wish there was something out there for men, right? But the beautiful part about it was I'm glad that there wasn't because I was able to step into it and go, I am going to do this because now I understand why men don't come to the groups. I understand why, you know, these men aren't searching for support and anything. Because for one, here's the kicker part. Men don't talk around women. We will
Mm,
support you, but we won't express what we're going through because again, it goes back to the beginning of time. We want to be the masculine one. We want you to depend on us because we're the protectors and the providers, right?
mm,
It's our job to make sure that you're okay. So
mm.
I'm willing to sacrifice mentally, physically, emotionally what I'm going through to make sure that you're okay.
Yeah,
It's
and
we
yeah,
come
and
away.
I think that's what's lovely is about it is you're like, okay, what did I need at the time that I didn't have? Okay, I'm
Right,
gonna
right.
create that, and I think of because I want to. I'm in the midst of writing a book. It's like, what did I need? What would I need? What would somebody need that I needed? I'm just going to create that. And that is what you did. What's interesting about, and I totally like with men and men leading men's groups and men being safe in that. I have had male clients, but one to one, and it's more of like, okay, not that I was like older than them, but it was more of a motherly, safe
Ah, yes,
environment
yes.
where we're not in a group of women or we're in a one-to-one online, but it was almost like this motherly, it's okay to share this and you don't have to share it with your partner because she won't. Yeah, you don't need to. It's
Yeah.
fine. With this
You
safe
said
right
the key
here.
words right there. You said the key words, right? Because in a young man's life, our first true relationship comes from our mother,
Mm,
right? So it
yeah.
makes sense. Now, in a group of women, unless they've grown up with a bunch of sisters and things like that, they won't step aside. But one on one with a woman, we feel more comfortable talking with that one person because it's like, wow, especially if you show that nurturing side of you, you
Yeah.
show that you care about what we're actually going through. And the biggest thing about it is we don't want you to tell our significant others
Yes.
because they
Right.
already have an image of who we are,
Mm,
right? But it's that motherly love that we look for in those times of deep, deep sorrow.
mm.
And that's just a theory. Tell me, and if I'm wrong, please let me know. But that is something that I begin to develop the understanding. It's like, it makes sense because I've talked to a lot of female therapists and things like that. And they go, well, I get men that come in here. I said, do they come to the groups? Right. So I ask questions. Do they come? No, they don't. They talk to you one-on-one, right? Yeah.
Yes.
It's the motherly feeling that they get from you that gets them to
Yes.
open up, because our mothers are the first ones that are there when a heartbreak happens, right?
Yeah.
Not our fathers. Our fathers are like, hey man, it's going to happen a lot more. Man up.
Yeah. Get
Man up.
over it. Yeah.
Yeah, get over it. There's plenty of fish in the sea.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's like, no, that's the only one, right? Because
Yeah.
our mothers are the one that go, baby, I see what you're going through. And you're right. You know what I'm saying? Tell me what's going on with you. They're the first person that we open up to. So it makes perfect sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Relationships that we develop, I tend to, and please add, let me know if I'm right or wrong, go on the right path to it if you please. But when we going through those extreme losses, the relationships that we build outside, and what I'm saying, during that course of time, is usually with people that can speak to us, not in a verbal, but through our love language.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what it also does is it highlights the areas where that is lacking, right? So for me, when all these losses had taken place, and it was like, as soon as my head like kind of lifted, I got hit again with another, and it not in a victim way, but in a, like, this is the reality, horrible, shitty way, that it highlighted the areas that were not serving me anymore. And one of them was my marriage, and he wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. We'd been together for years, but it just was not, it was, so finally it was just like, listen, this isn't working. I'm not happy. You're not happy. He's like, nope, I'm not. I'm like, I'm going, and we're still friends. We're still friendly. It was amicable, thankfully. But it highlights the areas where you're going, this doesn't work for me anymore. This doesn't serve me anymore. Or it highlights, this does. This is safe. This is wonderful. This is what I need. And usually it's the nonverbal. You're right. And that's what I tell people. You don't have to say anything to that person who is grieving. You just are there. You're just there. And I always say this because it is true. Like you were saying earlier, some people didn't know what to do. So they're like, oh my God. But the reality is, as the person who is supporting the griever, we must remember this is not about us. This is about them. So you can carry, you carry that and you're like, oh my God, this is so painful. And you cry with them, or if you're a man, you punch bags or whatever you do with it, go fishing. But whatever you do, and it's hard, you can walk away and go get the support you need. But at that moment, when you are with the griever, this is about them 100%, not about you.
Right. And I love that, because that's one of my favorite sayings. Whenever people ask me, why I do the work that I do, I said, because for the first time in my life, this makes me happy. And I realized that the things that I've gone through, it was never about me. It's not about me. It's about the person that I'm with. Right. And we talked about this before, because once I'm with that person, I'm in that space. I feel that I'm under a mental contract with them. What I carry inside of me, it doesn't belong to me. It's that person that I'm with in that moment, whether it be a group of men or just one man. But in that moment, this belongs to you. So I move accordingly, as if I owe it to you, because I cannot take this thing with me. So my contract, I'm determined to fulfill my contract with you, to make sure, and this is key point, to make sure that I leave you better than what I found you.
Yes.
Right. So I'm dedicated to that. I'm dedicated to anyone else that comes into it. This is yours. because I realized, this is the where the don't take it personal. I realized that they're not coming for me; they're coming for what I carry.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, yeah, because it isn't about you, but they are clearly attracted to you because of the safety, because of
Hmm.
your experience, because what you can offer them. And really, when you think about it, it is offering them hope. People say, or they listen to your show, they listen to my podcast, they're with us, they spend time with us, and they say, I thought I was all alone. I thought that what I was feeling wasn't normal, but actually this is
Exactly.
normal. And you
It's
start
very
to
normal.
normalize it, right? And you're like, oh my God, I'm not alone in this. Even though grief is very lonely, I'm not actually fully alone. And so you're offering, and we're offering them hope that, you know what? All this hideous stuff happens and it's awful. And we give you that space, that contract. But I just want to offer you hope that, like, we're still here alive
Right.
and,
We're living
moving
proof that it
forward.
doesn't kill you, right? Even though it feels like it from time, but we are living proof. We are the examples. And it when we talked the first time, this is why that term always comes up: to each one we teach one. So we go through the process, we go through the journey in order to learn, extract that information, and the people that we come in contact with, we could teach them from
Mm,
our mistakes, right? We struggle so they didn't have to, right?
yeah.
And that's what makes us who we are. That's what makes us such the beacon of light, that people are attracted to, right?
Yeah,
Throughout their journey.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
absolutely. I
who
mean,
we
listen,
are.
I think you could ask some people and they'd be like, Lisa is such a cow. Like, I can't stand her. She's horrible, right? For some of my family members might say that. Um, but, I responded accordingly, in my opinion.
Right,
But,
right.
but in the same token, others are like, oh my God, you're a lifesaver. Like, you're throwing out that life-saving device to keep me
Right.
going. So some people don't like it and some people like it. And it doesn't matter because it's not about that. It's about literally, like you said, helping somebody, looking back and giving them that line that says, yeah, it doesn't kill
Right.
you, even though you feel like you're dying.
Yes. Now let's talk about some of the tools in the healing process that you've used, to
Mm.
get to where you are now. So what was some of the basics, some a baseline of the tools that you've used?
Yeah. So, like I said before, I went and saw a bereavement counselor. So I was specific on the counseling. It was somebody who works specifically in bereavement.
Mhm.
And so that was one thing that I did. So I did talk therapy. I grabbed everything. I'm telling you what, like, I went to sound bath, like, have you ever heard of like sound bath or the gongs, and you just
I
lay
have.
there and listen yeah. So energy, anything. I was doing yoga. I was just like, whatever, I'm going to do everything that
Right.
and I went down the academic route as well. So started reading. I started like working on personal development stuff. But when I was really in the acute part of it, it was therapy, community, my friends. So I had
Mm.
good friends, and the ones who weren't, I shelved them because it just wasn't, it was too toxic. I needed the healthy people around
Yes.
me. So
Yes.
I was
Yes.
able to get rid of those who weren't. Um, so those are that to me is key. Any toxicity, anything that is causing more drama and trauma in your life, you need to get rid. It's hard, it's not easy, but get rid and find your people, find your healthy people.
Find your tribe. Yes.
Find your tribe. I started writing when my dad was sick. I didn't think writing was a thing. I'm not a journaler. Like, I've bought loads of journals and wrote in a page. And then I
Mhm.
thought, my kids will read this when I'm dead. Like, they'll be able to, and I never did it. So, but I started typing and I started writing. So I started blogging about my grief. I started writing about the process, and it was just very cathartic for me. So that
Mhm.
was an area that I did as well. And then, like I said, I hired a life coach because at some point I heard this, like, Lisa, you need to be a life coach. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. I had to Google it. And then I was like,
Yes.
oh, Yeah. So I was like, what do
Yeah.
they do? Yeah. It was the weirdest thing. I was like, I don't even know what that is. So I Googled it and I was like, that sounds about right. So I asked my friends and they're like, yeah, you should definitely go down that route. And I'm like, well, I better hire one first. So I hired a life coach and started working on goals. And so that was a bit later, a couple of years down the road where it was like, okay, now I'm starting to emerge. And that was one of the things that kind of kicked me into getting my certification and accreditation and speaking and all of that. So those are some of the tools that I used for me anyway. Everybody's different, but that's what I used.
That's very true. But you actually started podcasting as well. So
I
let's talk,
did.
yeah, let's talk about that. When did you get into podcasting, and what was the niche that you used to build
Yeah.
up your audience?
When you were saying like this, I need to create this because this is what I needed. It was
Right.
similar to that. It was like I knew there were podcasts on grief, but I thought, well, I have a story to share and I want to meet people and I don't want it to be about grief in the sense of like, here's all the trauma, bye, and then log off and everybody's depressed and needs to take their antidepressants. I wanted this kind of conversation that we're having, Tony. Here's the reality of what's happened, any type of loss. So, and then what modalities did you use? How
Mm,
did you find this kind of healing and experience? And then what are you doing now? Like, what are you doing now? And
right.
that was in my head. And I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to start one. So that was just maybe last year in 2023, this year. Um,
Okay.
and so I've met loads of people like yourself, like from all over the world who have so much and such inspiring stories
Right.
and are doing amazing work. And I just want to showcase that, but also offer hope to people who
Yes.
need it.
Yes.
When do I drop them?
Yeah. When do your
Yeah.
episodes air?
Yeah, so I do every other Thursday. Now, I think I have my last recording is with you for this year, and then I'll start again in January. So yeah, so I had loads of amazing people. So you're my final one of season 1.
I'm excited. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
And
me
you guys,
too.
now, do you offer support groups online? Or do you, or, where can people find you on your social medias? The links will be down
Yeah,
below.
so
It'll be on the YouTube. So anybody that's looking, those links will be there.
yeah, so I can be reached on Instagram at holistic_coach_Lisa, but also on Facebook, Holistic Life Coaching with Lisa Marie. I can be
Mhm.
found there and my website as well, which is holisticlifecoaching.org.uk. And I do one-to-one coaching. I do group coaching as well. And it's group there. Yeah, there's something very powerful about groups as well. So it just
Yes.
depends on what people need. I have the work of grief coaching, but then I also do the life coaching. And I do really feel like they go hand in hand. But I also work
They do.
with men and women who just are, do you know what? They want to take action to create a life that they desire and quite frankly, they deserve. And we want to kick out those roadblocks. And sometimes that is grief, working through the grief and then launching into that life that they desire and they deserve. So I help them with that as well. And that's usually one-to-one coaching.
That's truly amazing. That's truly amazing. Now, as we begin to wrap up, I always ask my guests if you had any words to give the audience, leave the audience. What would you give them?
I would say that there are what we've been talking about. There are no rules to grief. Find your tribe and get rid of toxic
Mhm.
people and situations in your life because that's what's going to create that safety space for you, that safe space for you to be. So those are the ones I'm like, if you're surrounded by toxic people, it's so hard to heal.
Right. I love that. I definitely love that. Lisa, thank you for being on the show and having such a wonderful conversation with me and sharing your journey and being so vulnerable. Um, well, I can't wait to be on your show. I really
Me
can.
too.
And, I look forward to having many more conversations, coming, in the near future. Whenever you want to come back on and you have something that you want to, let me know. Come back on. Oh my God,
Fantastic.
I love these conversations, man. I really do. And with that
Me
being
too.
said, you guys, if you're tuning in right now, if you're going to be tuning in later, and you've made it this far, you enjoy these sort of conversations, do me a favor, go to the YouTube channel, subscribe, help support the channel. Hit that bell notification, leave us a comment, let us know what you think, and share it with someone that you think that can benefit from these conversations. But most importantly, please go and check out Lisa's channel. And yeah, her links are going to be down below. And give her support. Let her know what you guys think too, as well. And as always, thank you for allowing us to bring these conversations to you. Thank you for allowing us to support you. And with that being said, you guys have a great day. Peace.